There are moments in history when a single human story rises like a dark shadow across the land, a story filled with passion, pain, pride, and fear, a story that begins with a promise of love for a nation and ends with ruin across the world. This is the story of a man who spoke about honor, unity, and destiny, a man who said he loved his country more than anything else, and yet left behind scars that would never fade. His words moved crowds, his voice shook great halls, and his dreams changed the path of millions of lives. But behind the loud speeches and flags in the wind was a deeper truth, a truth of anger, broken hopes, and choices that carried a terrible cost. This is the long and complex story of Adolf Hitler's claim of love for Germany, told like a journey through time, where every chapter opens a door into a life that shaped history in ways people still struggle to understand today. This story does not shine like a bright legend. It stands heavy, like a dark cloud across the sky of the past. It begins with a young boy in a quiet town and travels through years of struggle, rejection, and restless dreams. It follows a man who felt lost, who longed for purpose, and who slowly built a vision of a strong and united nation in his mind. As his voice grew louder, so did his influence, and he began to speak about pride, loyalty, and love for the land he called home. But the love he claimed to hold for Germany was shaped by anger, hatred, and extreme ideas that led to great suffering. In this documentary-style story, we look at his early life, his rise to power, the hopes he stirred, the harm he caused, and the long echo of his choices. Every step in this journey reminds us that strong feelings for a country can lift people up. But when twisted by fear and cruelty, they can also bring deep tragedy. In this chapter, we move back to the early days of Adolf Hitler's life, when he was a child growing up in a small town far from great cities and great power. He was a boy who watched the world around him with sharp eyes and a stubborn heart, living in a home with strict rules and many conflicts. He dreamed of art and painting, but the world did not open its doors to him, and rejection began to shape his thoughts. As he walked the streets of busy cities and struggled to find his place, he started to carry inside him a growing mix of pride, hurt, and resentment. He saw hardship, he saw poverty, and he saw people searching for meaning after times of war and loss. Slowly, he began to believe that his own purpose was greater than the life he was living, and the idea of a strong and glorious Germany started to take root in his mind, like a seed that would one day grow far beyond his control. Here the story moves into a time when Germany felt broken, filled with anger, confusion, and sadness after defeat and hardship. People felt poor, ashamed, and uncertain about the future, and many searched for someone to give them hope, strength, and direction. Adolf Hitler looked at this wounded nation and felt that he had found his moment. He spoke with fire in his words, saying that he loved Germany and wanted to restore its pride and honor. His speeches made crowds feel that they were part of something bigger, something powerful and united. But inside those speeches were messages of blame and division, where he pointed at groups he saw as enemies of the nation. His idea of love for Germany became narrow and harsh, built on fear and anger, not on kindness or peace. Still, many listened, many believed, and many followed, because they longed to feel strong again. In this chapter, the journey follows Adolf Hitler as his voice spreads across large halls and public squares, where people gather to hear his promises and his dreams. He presents himself as a guardian of the nation, as someone who would lift Germany up and give it back its lost honor. He uses simple words that reach the hearts of ordinary people, words about unity, discipline, and national pride. He says that every sacrifice is made out of love for the homeland, and many feel inspired by his passion. But beneath that passion grows strict control, force, and fear. His love for Germany becomes tied to power, obedience, and one single way of thinking. Those who disagree are pushed aside, and those who are seen as different are treated as outsiders in their own land. The idea of love turns into something cold and dangerous, shaping the lives of millions in ways they cannot escape. Now the story enters one of its most intense and painful stages, where Adolf Hitler's vision for Germany expands beyond borders and turns into a restless drive for conquest and control. He believes that his mission is not only to lift his nation, but to reshape lands and people according to his harsh beliefs. He says this is for the future of Germany, for strength and survival, but the path he chooses leads to destruction, war, and immense suffering. Cities fall silent under fear, families are torn apart, and innocent people face cruelty on a scale the world had never seen. His claim of love for Germany becomes twisted into a force that harms not only other countries, but also the very people he once promised to protect. What began as pride turns into tragedy, and the cost of his choices grows beyond measure. In this chapter, we watch as the world turns against the power he built, and the dream he tried to force upon history begins to break apart. The war brings terrible loss, and the nation he said he loved lies in ruins, its cities shattered, its people tired and afraid. The voice that once commanded great crowds grows weaker as defeat closes in. The love he claimed to hold for Germany leaves behind deep wounds and painful memories that will last for generations. Many people begin to see how his harsh beliefs and cruel actions brought harm instead of greatness, and how his vision of love was never truly love at all, but control and destruction dressed in the language of pride. This chapter looks at what remains after his life ends, when the world tries to understand what happened and why it happened. The story of Adolf Hitler and his claim of love for Germany becomes a warning told across time. People study his rise, his words, and his actions so they can learn how fear and anger can hide behind powerful speeches and promises. The legacy he leaves is not one of honor, but of sorrow and reflection. The nation he said he loved must rebuild itself from pain and memory, carrying both the lessons and the scars of his rule. His story becomes a reminder that true love for a country should lift people up, protect human life, and respect every person who lives within its land. And so the journey comes to its end, not as a tale of glory, but as a deep and serious story about power, belief, and consequence. Adolf Hitler spoke again and again about his love for Germany, yet the path he chose brought darkness to his nation and to the world. His life shows how strong feelings, when guided by hatred and cruelty, can change history in terrible ways. This story leaves us with a heavy truth and a clear lesson. A nation is not strengthened by fear or division. Real love for a country is gentle, just, and human, and it seeks peace instead of pain. As the echoes of this past continue to live in memory, the world looks back at this story so that such a dark journey is never repeated again. If you'd like, I can continue expanding this script with many more long chapters in the same style until it reaches the full extended length you want. Just tell me to continue. Even though he had won many battles, Adolf was still not happy. He wanted more land for the German people to live on. He looked toward the giant country of Russia. He thought that the Russian army would fall just as easily as the others. In the summer of 1941, he sent millions of soldiers into the east. This was the biggest invasion in the history of the world. At first, they won many big battles. They were almost at the capital city of Moscow. But then, the Russian winter came. It was colder than anything the German soldiers had ever felt. The engines of their tanks froze, and the men didn't have warm clothes. The Russians started to fight back with a fierce strength. This was the beginning of the end. Adolf refused to let his soldiers retreat because he thought that giving up even an inch of land was a betrayal of Germany. Because of this, thousands of his men died in the snow. His love for the idea of a giant empire was now costing the lives of the very people he claimed to love. Soon, the whole world was fighting against Germany. The United States joined the war, and started sending ships and planes. Germany was being attacked from all sides. Bombs began to fall on German cities every night. The beautiful buildings that Adolf had built were being turned into piles of bricks. The people who had cheered for him were now hiding in basements, hungry and afraid. Adolf stayed in his headquarters, looking at maps and ordering armies that didn't really exist anymore. He became very sick and shaky, but he still believed that a miracle would save him. He told his people to fight to the last man. He felt that if Germany could not win, it did not deserve to exist at all. This shows how his love had become something very different. It was no longer about the happiness of the people, but about his own pride and his refusal to admit he was wrong. The country he loved so much was being destroyed because he would not stop the war. By 1945, the enemy soldiers were inside Germany. They were getting closer to the city of Berlin every day. Adolf moved into an underground bunker deep beneath the ground. He stayed there for several weeks, rarely seeing the sun. He was surrounded by a few loyal followers, but he knew the end was near. He could hear the sound of the big guns above his head. He spent his time planning his final acts. Even at the very end, he talked about his love for Germany and how he had tried his best. He blamed everyone else for the failure. He didn't see that his own choices had led to this moment. In his final will, he wrote that he was happy to die in the city that was the heart of his country. He chose to end his own life rather than be captured. The man who had wanted to build a kingdom that would last 1,000 years saw it all fall apart in just 12. His story ended in a dark room under the earth, while the country he loved was in ruins above him. When the war finally stopped, Germany was a broken place. It was split into two pieces, and foreign soldiers were everywhere. Millions of people had died, and millions more had no homes. The world discovered the horrible things that had happened in the secret camps Adolf had built. The name of Germany, which he had wanted to make the most honored in the world, was now associated with great shame. This was the tragic result of his vision. He had wanted to make his nation a paradise, but he had left it a graveyard. The people had to work for many years to rebuild their lives and their reputation. They had to learn how to be a country again without the hate and the anger that Adolf had taught them. The love he had for Germany was so intense that it blinded him to the reality of the world and the value of other people. It serves as a lesson of what happens when nationalism goes too far and becomes a fire that burns everything it touches. Today, people still study the life of Adolf Hitler to try and understand how one person could do so much. We look at his love for his country and see how it was both a powerful force and a destructive one. He showed that you could take a broken nation and make it feel strong. But he also showed that if that strength is built on hate, it will eventually collapse. History teaches us that true love for a country should mean wanting it to be kind, fair, and peaceful. His version of love was about power and being better than everyone else. Because of this, he is remembered not as a hero, but as a warning. The buildings he built are mostly gone, and the empire he dreamed of is a memory of a dark time. But the lesson remains. We must be careful about the things we love and how we choose to show that love. We must remember that every person in the world has value, no matter what country they come from. After the darkness of those years, Germany did eventually find a way to become a great nation again. But this time, it was built on different ideas. They learned to love their country by being part of a peaceful world. They rebuilt their cities and became a place of art, science, and kindness. They made sure to never forget the mistakes of the past so they would never happen again. This new Germany is a strong and happy place, but it does not try to rule over others. It shows that there is a better way to be proud of your home. The story of Adolf's love for Germany is a finished chapter, and the world has moved on to a better one. It is a story that started with a boy looking at a map and ended with a world that learned the importance of peace. We remember it so that the fire of that kind of hate never burns so bright ever again. As we look back at the entire journey, we see a man who was driven by a single idea. From his early days as a lonely boy in Linz to his final moments in the bunker, his focus was always on his vision for Germany. He was a man of great energy and a powerful voice, but he lacked the heart to see the suffering he caused. His life was a whirlwind that swept up millions of people and changed the course of human history. Even though he thought he was creating something eternal, he created something that could not last because it was not built on truth or goodness. The story of his love for Germany is a complex and painful one. It is a reminder of how easily people can be led astray by a leader who promises them greatness. It is a reminder to always look for the truth and to treat all people with respect. The world we live in today was shaped by the events of that time. The organizations we have to keep peace and the laws we have to protect human rights all came because of the tragedy of World War II. In a strange way, the destruction caused by one man's vision led the world to work harder for a future where that could never happen again. Germany today is a leader in making the world a safer and better place. This is the real victory over the darkness of the past. The journey of Adolf Hitler shows us the heights of human ambition and the depths of human cruelty. It is a story that stays with us, a ghost from history that tells us to be wise and to be kind. By understanding his love for Germany, we understand more about ourselves and the world we want to build. In the end, the story of Adolf Hitler's love for Germany is a story of a great tragedy. It began with a dream of unity and pride, but ended in a nightmare of war and death. He was a man who loved a nation but did not love humanity. He tried to build a world that only had room for one kind of people, and the world fought back to show that it belongs to everyone. His life shows us that power without a conscience is a dangerous thing. As the documentary of his life comes to a close, we see the images of the past fading away. We see the ruins being cleared and the new buildings rising. We see a world that has learned a hard lesson and is trying to do better. The journey is over, but the memory remains as a guide for the future. We wrap up this long and complicated story with a hope that the love people have for their countries will always be a love that brings people together, not one that tears the world apart. This is the final word on a man who wanted to be a legend, but became a lesson for all of time.